I'm here at Our Story Studios, and look who stopped by to see me.
Mike Humpal, City Administrator with the City of Fairmont. Jeff,
Mike,
how you doing?
I'm doing good.
Walked right across the street just
Well,
to
I'm so
see
glad you came over to visit. You know,
it's always fun.
we just got done shooting an episode of Martin County on TV. Would you like to see that right now?
You know it. I'd love to see it.
Well, let's check it out.
Let's look at it.
Hi, this is Lenny Tvedten. I'm with the Martin County Historical Society, and today we're going to interview Don Dahlke, talk to him about some of his experiences, and specifically and especially with the Fairmont Martins. So, Don, good to see you. And what brought you to Fairmont?
I'd been in professional baseball for 3 years, plus 2 years in the service, and my AAA contract was no longer being renewed, so I decided I better look for something other than professional baseball. Had my degree in teaching from Iowa State Teachers College, and I'd heard that Southern Minnesota baseball was going strong, so I started looking for various teaching positions in Southern Minnesota.
Okay, Don, before we continue, I'm going to just talk a little bit about a book that Jeff received about the TV Center. Ann Miller, Marv Miller's wife, had sent this book. Marv had the TV Center in Fairmont, and we really appreciate it. Jeff's read it, and he's going to let me read it. He said it was really good, but we just want to acknowledge and thank her for her late husband. Marv ran the TV Center, and as I recall, I bought a TV from him once. We really appreciate it, and thank you, Ann, for doing that. Okay, now as we were talking about the Martins, came here, and what year was that again?
1955.
1955. And you start playing with the Martins right away then?
Yes.
The 55 team was a pretty good team, as I recall.
Very good. First year in the Southern Mini, and Fairmont was not supposed to be strong enough to support a team in the Southern Mini, but that we proved differently by winning the championship that very first year.
Okay, when you say championship, was that a state title or just a Southern Mini title or Western Mini? Or
it was a Southern Mini title plus the playoff with the Western Mini League, which was St. James. So we swept them in 3-game playoff series to become overall state AA champions.
Where was the park located at that time?
Well, the mall right now occupies the ballpark.
The location of where it was? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, Fairmont Martins, how'd they get their name?
That was kind of interesting because no one really knew where it came from. So I did a little research at the Historical Society and found that Fairmont had many semi-pro amateur teams, but they were named the Redbirds.
Oh.
When Fairmont joined the Western Mini, which included Redwood Falls, New Ulm, Sleepy Eye, and so on, Redwood Falls was known as the Redbirds, so Fairmont had to change their name. And they did this by the Fairmont Board of Directors offered the community a chance to select a name, and they would draw it from a hat. And to encourage more people to enter, they offered $500 prize for the winning selection.
That was big money in those days.
That's right, and the winner was Howard Fitz.
Oh, really?
But that's how the Martins became the Martins of today.
What kind of salaries did they make?
Undetermined. Depends on your position, I think. Pitchers and catchers were sought after because, that's the basis of starting a good ball game. And it varied, I think, depending on your position, your experience.
Mm-hmm.
We had a lot of college ball players at one time that came into this area, and of course, they weren't eligible for salaries, even though some of them may have received salaries.
Where are some of the other places you played?
My first year after graduating from college at Cedar Falls, I signed a contract with Indianapolis, which was a farm club of Pittsburgh. And my first assignment was to Charleston, South Carolina, in the old Sally League. That was an 8-team league, and pretty confined. We didn't have a lot of long bus trips, so to speak. Interrupted in August because I got a notice from Uncle Sam. You're due to report for a physical. So I had a short season then, and then served 2 years in the Army, and was fortunate enough to be a clerk typist, and ended up staying 2 years in the Army playing baseball with the Fort Leonard Wood ball team. And they were all pro ball players.
What are some of the other cities you played in on the sides?
Well, following my discharge from the Army, my contract had been shifted from Indianapolis to Hollywood, which was affiliated with Pittsburgh, and that was called an open classification, which was the same as the AAA.
Mm-hmm.
That Pacific Coast League was going to be the third major league, besides the American and the National. So I stayed there for that summer, 1953, and then following that, my next contract was still a AAA, but I was assigned to Denver, Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I met Harry Pritz and Gordy Feigard and Clyde DeWitt, and Earl Weaver was our second baseman.
Okay, and Earl Weaver was a manager of the Baltimore Orioles at one time.
That's right.
Who were some other notable players that you met that went on to go become part of the major leagues?
When playing at Hollywood, when you were on the road, so to speak, you always had a roommate wherever you were staying. And my roommate happened to be Dale Long, who ended up going to Pittsburgh, and to this day holds a record that hasn't been broken as far as I know. 8 home runs in 8 consecutive days. I think that's been tied by Don Mattingly that was with the Yankees.
Any others besides him?
Jim Gentile was at Pueblo. Pueblo was in the same league as Denver in the Western League. And Pueblo had Sparky Anderson at second base, Maury Wills at shortstop, Jim Gentile at first base, Kenny Staples catching. They were all good ball players.
Yeah, they were all major league players known for anybody that remembers the major
Yes.
leagues in the 1960s.
Yes.
Which I do. I remember them, yeah.
The Hollywood Ball Club was made up of a lot of guys that had been in the majors and were kind of sent down, so to speak, hoping there'd be another major league.
Mm-hmm.
And we did have a couple of fellows that went on. Lee Walls ended up playing and became a coach for Frisco. My manager at that time was Bobby Bragan, who was involved in the Jackie Robinson episode.
Sure.
Jackie became a player for...
Wasn't Bragan a manager for the Milwaukee Braves?
At one time. He managed 3 different major league clubs, and I shouldn't say this, but he was fired by 3 different major league clubs.
Well,
but he was an
facts are facts.
excellent manager, and he was a catcher.
You know, Don, before we continue with some more questions and information about the Martins, we did an interview back in 2002. I did an interview with you. And would you like to see that now?
Yes.
Yeah, that'd be great. Okay, let's take a look at it. This is Lenny Tvedten of the Martin County Historical Society's Pioneer Museum. And today we're going to talk to Don Dahlke. He played for the Fairmont Martins a number of years back, and we're going to ask him some questions about baseball in Fairmont, and I think it was the 1950s. Don, can you tell us when you played for the Martins, and tell us a little bit about the Martins as you recall from the time that you played?
I came here in 1955 to play with the Martins, who were then joining the Southern Mini League. The Southern Mini League extended from Winona to Fairmont, Mankato, Faribault, Owatonna, Austin, Rochester, and Albert Lea. We had a schedule of 42 games with a few exhibition games plus the playoffs. So we usually had about 50 ball games in a season. That league continued for about 6 years that I happened to play in it till 1960. Prior to that, the Martins had been in the Western Mini. So Southern Mini and Western Mini were 2 of the strong semi-pro leagues in Minnesota at that time.
Okay, you mentioned they were semi-pro leagues. Now, how does that compare with like minor league baseball? Was it on a par with maybe a Class C or B league of that time?
Well, all of our ball players at that time were semi-pro or salary ball players. So a lot of them came here because they weren't advancing in minor league baseball. And most of our ball players had played Class A ball, which was probably in the middle of the minor league system. AAA being the largest next to the major leagues, and Class D the smallest. So most of our ball players were Class B and Class A, and a few had been higher than that.
Okay. Do you happen to recall, did any of the players you played either with or against make it to the major leagues?
Well, there were several in the Southern Mini that went into the major leagues. Moose Scowen was probably one of the most notable, and
Sure.
Jerry Kendall from the University of Minnesota. Some of them had major league experience and came to the Southern Mini League to play. One of the home run hitters in the Western Mini prior to my being here was Rudy York at St. James.
Oh, yeah, that's interesting. There's some names I remember from when I was younger. You said a lot of the fellows came here to play baseball. was their salary playing baseball enough to support them then, or did they have another job that they worked on, most of them, or can you tell us a little bit about that?
Nearly all of them had part-time jobs in addition to playing baseball. Some of them stayed here, notably Harry Pritz and Herb Banton and myself. Jim McNulty was our manager all during that era. In fact, he came here, I believe, in about 1950. And he did a fantastic job of getting ball players. And I don't know if we ever had a losing season as such.
Yeah, I noticed in looking through the booklet there are quite a few winning seasons. Where was the park located at that time where you played baseball?
Well, if you went to the corner of Willow and Highland, right next to Charlotte Park, the ballpark faced southeast. So if you hit one into right field, it would hit the houses on Willow Street. And if you hit one into left field, you'd hit on top of the county market at this time.
Okay, that's interesting. Who was there a specific owner of the team at that time, or how? And today, we talk about owners and how teams are run. How was the team owned or operated? Who was in charge of it at that time?
They had a board of directors consisting of usually 10 to 12 to 15 people, and these people went out and raised some money, selling ads on the fence. We had a wood fence all the way around the ballpark, and people could rent signs or have signs painted advertising, sold a scorebook, had promotions during the year, solicitations. They really worked hard to promote baseball. Of course, baseball was big following World War II, and they had to compete with other communities too, in the Western Mini, the First Night League, and the Iowa State League. So there was a lot of competition for baseball at that time.
Okay, good. We're getting close to, we're going to have to wrap up, but I'd like to ask if you have what your most memorable moments might be from when you played with the Martins.
Oh, that's difficult because we had a lot of good times and a lot of down times, but most of our ball games were 2 hours and 15 minutes. We hustled in and out, and so did the other clubs, and we went in to win the state championship in Class A ball in 1959. That was at St. Cloud, and that was quite memorable, of course.
Okay, well, thank you. I'd like to mention I worked with Don Dahlke at the Fairmont Middle School for a number of years before he retired. It's been a pleasure to have you here, Don. Appreciate it. For Hometown Focus, this is Lenny Tvedten. Okay, Don, that was 17 years ago, but, I think we look younger now than we did then.
Absolutely.
Fake news, huh?
Yes.
You talked about Hollywood, and what happened out there? It seemed like I saw something in Life magazine about the team you were playing for back in those days.
Yes, we were known as the Hollywood Stars, of course, and our rival next to us is the Los Angeles Angels.
Mm-hmm.
They were in the Pacific Coast League also. And it so happened we had a little friendly brawl in one of the afternoon ball games. It all started on a Friday night when we happened to break up the ball game. A guy by the name of Keller got an extra base hit to win the ball game.
Mm-hmm.
So the next day we're Saturday afternoon game, and guess who's pitching for Los Angeles? Joe Hatton from Bancroft.
Oh, really?
So the fellow that broke up the game on Friday night, Frank, first time up he kind of got dusted by an inside
Brush
pitch.
back a little bit?
Yes. The next time up, Hatton nailed him.
Ooh.
And that didn't go over with Frank, so he drops his bat halfway to first base and then makes a left turn to go for Hatton. And then fists start flying, and the dugout's emptied. So they settled that down, and Frank got kicked out, but Hatton was allowed to continue pitching. So we had a pinch runner on first base for Frank Kelleher, and the first pitch he takes off for second base, slides, and he's out, but he kicks the ball out of the second baseman's glove. So he's safe. Next pitch he steals third, he's out by 10, 15 feet. So he slides, but not very well, very high, and caught the guy's shirt.
Oh.
And that started the brawl. So
And that was all written up in, was it Life magazine?
there was a series of pictures in Life magazine. The photographer for Life magazine happened to be at the ball game, and he caught the whole series. And today I think you can view it on the internet if you go to Hollywood Baseball,
Sure.
and it'll show the sequence.
Interesting. Was Jim McNulty a part of your team at that time?
No, Jim was, that would have been Jim playing at Fergus Falls in that era.
Yeah, he was, everything I read about the Martins is he was a manager and he played second base. And I think he could be described as somewhat of a colorful person,
Absolutely.
colorful player.
Very good manager.
Uh-huh.
Very good manager. And people enjoyed playing for him.
And I also read something to the effect that wasn't there some legal action regarding him from the minor leagues?
Yes, the minor leagues tried to enforce some kind of a ban on semi-pro teams in the Midwest recruiting players from the minor leagues. But that did not materialize.
So he'd be characterized then as an excellent recruiter?
Yes. They always claimed he had his little black book with lots of names.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, after I had signed, he wanted to know if I knew of a couple pitchers that might be interested. So I gave him Harry Pritz's name and Loyal Bloxham because I played with them in '54. And they both agreed they were not going to advance any further. So that's how they ended up in Fairmont.
Okay, I was wondering too, a lot of the players, they were playing for 3 months out of the year. Did they stay in Fairmont during the off season then? If so, how did they support themselves, or what kind of work did they do, or did they go somewhere else?
Well, Harry Pritz, of course, stayed here.
Mm-hmm.
Loyal Bloxham would stay part of the year, but he didn't really have a full-time or a part-time job either.
Okay.
Some of the ball players, like Dick Eaton, I think he worked for DeWar Electric as a part-time job. Hank Workman, that played with us in ~55, he did an internship with Newt Johnson and
Really?
Leo Seifert.
So didn't he become a lawyer in Los Angeles?
He
or something?
became a lawyer. He's in Los Angeles. So not many of them stuck around. Dudding, of course, from Bancroft was back and forth. Don Neuenfeld played with us a couple of years.
Oh, Bobby Yankovic, he played too, didn't he?
Bobby Yankovic was here before I came,
Oh, okay.
and he ran the car lot.
Yeah.
Was
that part of a recruiting effort too, to get them jobs
Yes.
after in the off
Yes,
season?
yes. But a lot of the guys were from east or west or even
Mhm.
south, and they didn't want to stay in the cold Minnesota climate.
Sure. Well, what can you tell us about the evolution of the Martins from when you played up to, say, today? How has it changed? They're still the Fairmont Martins baseball
Yes.
team.
1961, I think, was probably the last year that the Martins played, but not in the AA Southern Mini League.
Mhm.
Following that, it just disbanded. There wasn't any baseball. There were a couple of attempts to get an amateur team going, but didn't materialize.
Sure.
So in about 1974, we formed a new baseball board of directors. We had about 10 or 11 fellows that decided, yeah, that's the thing we should do. Get baseball started again in
Mhm.
Fairmont. So we formed the committees that were going out to contact people to get materials, money for uniforms, baseballs, and so on. And we had several young fellows out of high school and some college ball players that wanted to play. So the ball club was established in '74. The lights were not at the high school field. They had, following '61 season and the mall was taking over, they took the lights down and stored them, thanks to Bud Olson, who was a park
Oh.
superintendent.
Sure.
The lights themselves were not any good anymore. So after getting the ball club formed, then we played Sunday afternoon ball games. In about 1975, Gordy Benscoot was on the city council, and he said, well, we need lights. We know where the towers are. They need some work. The Lions Club pitched in a lot of other volunteers and sanded and repainted them, and had a lot of help from the school district, and the lights were established at the present site at the high school. So then the ball club started playing in another caliber or league,
Mhm.
and full schedules, and that's the way it continued up until the present time.
Okay, and all of that is from the time after you played, all of that was amateur baseball.
Amateur baseball, yes.
Whereas in your era, it was actually professional baseball.
All semi-professional.
Or semi,
yes.
well, semi-pro, but
So-
yeah.
And today, I don't know who's can make it up. So board of directors, but
Mhm.
I'm sure there must be somebody.
Sure.
So I think our board stayed together until about 1984.
Okay, a couple other things I was interested in too, Don. One is, what was the ticket price? What did tickets cost at that time? And secondly, which was, in your opinion, the best ball club that you played on during those years?
The admission price was 75 cents for adults, 25 cents for kids.
Kids? I probably didn't pay your salaries then.
No way. And they had a knothole gang also, and
Sure.
they had reserve seats behind home plate, so
Okay,
that
interesting.
brought some
Yeah.
other income. And the best ball club that played, as far as I was concerned, in the Southern Mini during those years was the 1957 club, which again was a state championship ball club.
Okay, interesting. Well, you know, we mentioned Jim McNulty before, and I've got a clip from 2006 when I visited with you and Jim McNulty. Should we take a look at that now?
That'd be fine.
Okay, great. Today I have the pleasure of visiting with a couple of former Fairmont Martins players, Jim McNulty on my left and Don Dahlke on my far left. And we're going to talk a little bit about the glory days of Fairmont baseball back in the, 1950s approximately.
That's right.
And to begin with, though, yesterday was kind of a big day at the Twins game. And Jim and Don, if you can tell us a little bit about what happened at the Twins game yesterday.
Well, we met with all the people on the field. There were 20 of us on the field at the time before the game prior. And they had me throw out the first ball, which I did. And
Called strike?
not quite. The catcher he did catch the ball. It was he caught it on a fly, so I made the throw all right, I guess.
Okay.
But it wasn't a strike,
Okay, well.
unless the umpire had one eye.
And what was the event yesterday at the Twins game? Well, this was kind of in honor of something called Town Ball, is that right?
It was an honor of town ball and was in the sale of this book, wasn't it, Don?
Two people, Armin Peterson and Tom Tomaszek, coordinated in writing this book about Minnesota Town Ball from about 1946 to the 1960 era. And this was part of the initiation and promoting the book somewhat by having a group of older ball players being recognized on the field and meeting to reminisce a little bit about town ball in that era.
And the Minnesota Twins who were in conjunction with this program.
Okay. And Town Ball, how do you describe or define Town Ball of that era?
Well, at that time, I think there were three different classifications by the Minnesota Baseball Association. Double A was considered the higher classification. Class A was the next step down, and Class B would have been pretty much amateur ball.
Mm-hmm.
Class A, I'm sure, involved mostly professional or hired ball players or semi-pro ball players. Class A would have been three people that might have been hired to play for a ball club. And then the Class B was strictly town team baseball.
And Fairmont
Double A,
Martins?
we were double A
Double A?
at that time, yes. And it was mostly professional ball players that in those days they were not making enough money to make a living playing professional ball. And the chances of going anyplace. And the thing about this town ball, the people not only got to play the game they love, but they also received a job. And you could play baseball 3 or 4 days a week and work on the side.
So they played baseball here in Fairmont, but they also worked at a business or industry here in town?
Whatever, yes.
Okay.
I think Don was.
Yes, when I came here, I was hired to teach as well as to play some baseball in the summer.
Okay. Jim, how'd you happen to come to Fairmont? You're not from this area originally, I don't think, are you?
No, but it was a strange story. I had been playing and managing a championship team in 1950 in Fergus Falls, and I in the service in the Marine Corps. My good friend Dick Durrell, who became the publisher of People magazine, he got me to go to Fergus Falls. I wasn't making any money in a Dodger chain, not going anyplace, so I went to Fergus Falls. And after that league had folded, I went to Estival, Iowa. They needed a manager, which was down in this area. And in Estival, Iowa, one of the umpires was a man from Fairmont called Wesley Frank. He was a barber here.
Barber, okay.
And he said Fairmont needed a manager, and that was in 1951. So I came here in 1952, the following year, because of Wes Frank.
Okay. Interesting.
and started playing and managing this baseball team for 10 years.
The 1950s, was that kind of the main era for town ball?
Well, I think more or less that's when the town ball really grew stronger than any other time in any
Mhm.
period.
Okay. And what about the league? Can you tell us a little bit about the league that the Martins played in, the other teams?
Well, it was a very, very tough league, and Don would have to tell you what type of baseball it was, and he was a top-notch AAA up to AAA in professional ball,
Mhm.
and he could tell you what he thought.
Well, it's very comparable to Class A ball, I would say, and some Double A
Mhm.
professional leagues. Fairmont was in the Western Mini prior to my coming. I think they were in there 51,
Yeah.
52, somewhere in that era. I came here in 55, and at that time Fairmont joined the Southern Mini, which
Okay.
involved teams from Winona, Austin, Albert.
That was the premium league.
That was the best
Yeah.
league in the state at the time.
And you had some pretty good teams at that time, too, here in Fairmont, right?
Oh,
Well, we
yes.
won 3 titles, I think, 55, 57, and 59. We were
State
Class
titles?
A
Yes.
champions, yes.
There was a period when Double A did not go to the state tournament anymore. I forget what period that was, but they didn't enter state tournaments, but we had won our own league championships during that period.
What kind of attendance did you draw during those games? Do you recall? I
Wow.
suppose it's hard to say exactly, but
I remember one year, I think they published the average attendance for Fairmont was well over 1,200 per game. And we had a 49-game schedule, which meant we played 24, 25 at home. So we drew pretty well.
Yeah, it was doing very well.
now you had most of you probably had part-time jobs or jobs here in town, but you were also paid for playing baseball then, too?
Yes.
How was that, who supported the team as far as making payments, or who owned the team, or how did that work?
Well, they had a board of directors that did a lot of work raising funds to promote.
Different
the ball
business
club.
areas,
Yeah.
different places in town
owners of the
donated
team?
money, and no, they donated money and
Paid
towards the
players?
payment of the players, yes.
Oh, okay.
They had a scorecard with all kinds of
And
advertising.
they had a scorecard, right.
Numbered scorecards for drawing at every ball
And
game.
they sold the scorecard, which made money for the ball club.
Okay, sure. Well, baseball is a national pastime. Thinking back to that era and comparing it to now, how would you compare the mood of baseball? You know, has it changed? Was it different at that time? Just in general, what's your feeling about that?
I'll say one thing, in my lifetime, the camaraderie that we had, there's no comparison to what it was then.
Really?
And now it's not like that, I don't believe. We had such close relations, and everybody helped each other, everybody got along.
Do you still keep in contact with many of these players from the 50s?
Always, yes, and I love it. It's been a most wonderful thing in my life, and these years in Fairmont, I'll never forget. It's just a privilege to be here.
Were you anywhere else besides Fairmont then, as far as playing town ball?
Well, Fergus Falls, Minnesota, and Estevan, Iowa.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Between the two of you, there must be some memorable events that you can think about during your careers playing town ball. Can you think of a few that are interesting or humorous?
I
Or
recall one year, I think you broke your arm early in the season,
Yes.
and I think you had to sit out a few games, so I had to fill in for you at second base, which was probably a
Oh, that's-
mistake.
that's
That
a-
was a mistake.
That's a tough thing to do. I don't know.
I remember one year also, Jim, you were a little overweight when we came into spring, and you decided to go on an egg diet.
Yes,
How long did you stay on that?
not long enough.
We had a lot of good times, so.
We had great times. It's been a great association. The closeness of the players and later in life, we all stayed together.
Uh-huh.
It's just wonderful.
Well, you were involved in careers after baseball. Don, I know you were a teacher and counselor
Yes.
here in the Fairmont school system. And Jim, what did
Well,
you do in addition to baseball?
I ended up going back to New York City, and I ended up running a taxi business in Long Island.
Oh, really?
I had a taxi business.
Okay.
And then through some friends and my wife, being a registered nurse, working at St. Mary's Hospital, she had a connection with the hospital, and they hired me to handle the Cornell University Medical Center, the driving for the doctors. I did all of that for 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
It was just great, very interesting.
Where do you live now, Jim?
I live in the Pocono Mountains in Pennsylvania,
Oh, beautiful.
on the
area.
lake, yes. And the reason we moved there, our children were all back east, so we wanted to live in a place that reminded us of Minnesota.
Really?
And it's that type of community.
Good.
So that's why we enjoy it. But I miss the people here, and I miss Minnesota.
You had a good connection to Fairmont and Martin County then?
Yes, always.
Great. Now, there are still some people in Fairmont that played town ball during that era. Excuse me. Can you recall some of the names of those people?
Well, Harry Pritz is still in town here, of course, Pritz Electric.
Mhm.
And Bill Dudding is down in Bancroft, Iowa.
Is Bob Yankovic still here?
Bob Yankovic
Bob
is
Yankovic.
here.
Okay.
Herb Banton's over in Albert Lee. Donnie Neuenfeld lives here out in Grenada.
He's in Grenada, right? Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, good. So there's still quite a few around. And
Yes.
I'll have to say, when I was about 10 years old, I used to watch you guys play baseball. So, and I'm only 35, so you know,
Yes.
you guys aren't very old.
I think
so.
we must be a little bit older, yes.
I think Al Thune is still in
Al Thune is
Fairmont
here,
too,
yeah.
yes. Mhm.
Well, I really enjoyed it at that time, and I'm glad you came back, Jim and Don, to talk to us a little bit about this. And,
Thank you.
Any closing comments before we conclude our interview?
Well, I don't know how you broke that bat, Jim. Do you?
Most people know I didn't break it hitting.
Well, thank you very much,
Well, thank
gentlemen.
you.
Appreciate it. And the book, Town Ball, will be shown here in just a little bit by Mr. Hagan, and I'm sure you'll be able to get a copy of it if somebody would like. This is Lenny Tvedten for Hometown Focus. Well, that was a good interview, wasn't it, Don?
Thank you very much.
All right. In that era, who were the promoters, locally, the promoters that helped the Martins become what they were?
I think there was a board of 10 to 12 people, included such people as Clyde Blotty,
Now, he had a laundry business or something at
Yes.
one time?
Henry Breen, the John Deere,
Breen, John Deere, sure.
Wendy Becker from Northrop,
Elevator,
Elevator, Lumberyard. Jay Pizer was very influential.
Fairmont Furniture.
They had other people like Tony Subert was a baseball fan.
Mm-hmm.
Willard Wakey from years gone by. Lintons, George Linton and Harry Linton, I think were both influential.
Were they accountants?
Accountants,
Okay.
yes.
So without these people, the Martins may not have been, huh?
No, it was their efforts that got the ball club going and got the money flowing in, so they were able to get the ball club going.
Oh, great, great. We appreciate their efforts and glad they did it. You know, Don, and looking back at some of the box scores from the 50s, I see that you played against a well-known pitcher named Satchel Paige. What can you tell us about that game?
Well, he was pitching at every community he could possibly pitch every night,
All right?
and the Fairmont Baseball Association convinced him to pitch against the Martins one night for 3 innings. He was pitching the 3rd, 4th, and 5th innings,
Mm-hmm.
and we happened to get a few runs off of him. I think I had a base hit, Dudding had a base hit, Milt Nielsen hit a home run off of him.
Really?
And he's trotting to first base, and Satchel says, "Man, you're not supposed to do that to me." So we did beat him 3-1, I think, but he was just with the makeup crew.
And-
One other thing, they always wonder how
Yeah.
distant the fences were in Martin Park.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, good.
Left field line was 335 feet, pretty good poke. Center field 425 feet, and I never saw anyone hit one over that.
Really?
But right field was short, 308, so the houses on Willow Street were hit quite
Right by
often
them.
with home run pitches.
Well, thanks, Don. Appreciate it very much.
You're welcome.
Now that was a great episode, wasn't it?
Very good.
Absolutely. Love showing the folks. And Mike, want to thank you for
Thank
stopping
you.
by.
You bet.
And as we share with the folks, the sponsors that made this show possible, remember, it's not just the past, but the present that tells our story.